Hello BookTube, it's Leah Cooper here, and today I am bringing you the spring reading tag. I'm a little late to this party. We're already a month into spring, I think, but whatever. It's still technically spring, and we'll just ignore the fact that I'm recording this video while it's raining outside. That is springtime in Washington. So I will leave a link to this tag's creator down in the description bar below and up in the cards. I originally saw Lauren from Lauren in the Books do this, and I thought it sounded a lot of fun. I'll also leave a link to her video. You should totally check it out. And yeah, let's get going. So question one is, which books are you most excited about reading in the spring? And if I had filmed this video a week ago, I would have said the Captive Prince trilogy, but I mainlined those books hard and read them all in 3 days, so that's read. The next thing I'm most excited to read, and I'm probably going to be reading it next month, is The Raven Stratagem by Yoon Ha Lee. I was approved for an arc of this from NetGalley. It is the sequel to Nine Fox Gambit, which I read last month and really loved. So yeah, I'm super excited for this book. It also comes out in early June, so it'll be great. I'll read it in spring and it comes out in early spring. Even though it has nothing to do with spring, it's a space opera, but whatever. Question number two is, what books make you think of spring? This is hard. I'm not a very seasonal reader. I occasionally am a little bit of a seasonal movie watcher. Like, I always like to read and watch Harry Potter in the winter. But I think that's one of the only things that I do seasonally. Everything else I'm very, Bridget Jones, like, you always want to read Bridget Jones in January because that book is a New Year's resolution. Spring, I don't know. Maybe like Jane Austen, because a lot of the time I think her books tend to be kind of like the spring, summer season in Bath. Like Northanger Abbey is definitely that. A lot of her books, I think, tend to take place sort of in the spring, or they start around the spring, or they end around the spring. So Jane Austen, which I am planning, I need to read Sense and Sensibility and Mansfield Park in the spring. So, another sort of springtime book. I read it in the winter though, so I don't know if it would make me think of the spring, but that would be Uprooted by Naomi Novik. And this is my copy. I own a copy. So, like, if you follow my vlog at all, you'll know I read this for Borrow-a-thon in a day. Freaking loved it, couldn't put it down, so I had to order a copy for myself. And it's the UK cover, which I actually like. I like both covers, the UK and the American, but this one has flat edges instead of the deckled edges, which I do prefer the flat edges. This one kind of reminds me of spring just in that it takes place over an extended period of time, but kind of one of the elements is that there's like a forest and it's falling to corruption and it's dark and wintry, but by the end of it they've kind of saved the forest, it's blooming again. I think the book like starts in the fall and then ends in the spring, if I'm remembering correctly, because there's like they do like the summer solstice at the very end, and it's all about like flowers and blooming and earth magic and just that kind of stuff. So probably uprooted. Question number three. I went on Goodreads and to look at like page numbers, and this question kind of has two answers. So if you consider The Lord of the Rings to be one book, then technically The Lord of the Rings is the longest thing I've ever read in its entirety. My edition was like 1100 pages. If you consider that 3 books, which I kind of do, I think it's it's really the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I just read the bundle, basically. That's kind of how I feel about it. So if you don't count that, then the longest book I've actually read is my edition of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is 870 pages. It's the Scholastic. So this is just quite a chunky book, and the words aren't that huge. Like, the text is pretty average size. It's not huge YA text. So yeah, that's it. There are other books that I have read that could have been longer, but I read them so many years ago. I don't actually remember the versions that I read. So I have read, for instance, Alexander Dumas novels. I've read Three Musketeers, I've read The Viscount, I've read 20 Years After, and if you take his third novel, which is The Viscount of place name I cannot pronounce, it has 3 parts in it, and one of the parts includes The Man in the Iron Mask. And I read that while I was in grade school. And I am almost positive that I read an edition that had all 3 parts in it, but it was called The Man in the Iron Mask. And I don't know if that was because it was an American version and they changed the title to appeal to American audiences because it was also around the same time that the film came out and it had a film cover. Or if it only contained part 3, which is The Man in the Iron Mask. I've looked at it and I was like 10 or 12 when I read it. So, you know, it's like peering down into the depths of my brain remembering it. So if it had all 3 versions, that would be the longest thing I've ever read, but I can't confirm that, so we're gonna say Order of the Phoenix. Point is, I don't really read a whole ton of long books. I read more long books when I was younger. I prefer shorter books. Like 350 pages that's a fine length. I don't need it to be longer. And I really love novellas. Question number 4 is, what book would you recommend to brighten someone's day? I would probably recommend a couple of things, depending on the person. One of those would be Pride and Prejudice. It's classic, it's just lovely, it's sweet, it's funny, and it ends happily ever after. Another thing I would recommend is probably Bridget Jones's Diary, the first one, just because it's a real fun, laugh a riot book. It's really cathartic, so like no matter how down the dumps your life might feel, Bridget Jones's life is pretty down the dumps too, and you can have a good laugh about it. If neither of those books was appropriate, like if they're really not into romancy type books, I'd probably recommend something from the Discworld series. Okay, so I mentioned that I've read a lot of fan fiction written by Naomi Novik that I freaking love, and she writes a lot of different slash pairings, but obviously this is Het, and I think Temerary's Het. I haven't actually read Temeraire, but I think it is. So I would love to see her write something with queer protagonists. Kind of, I'm not gonna say like, I want to see her write a captive prince-like tale, because that's not right. There's certain themes in Captive Prince that really I don't think are, well, they might be. Anyways, I would love to see her do something with queer protagonists. For genre, I'm pretty easy. Like, obviously she's written a lot of fantasy, but I've seen her write contemporary science fiction, fan fiction, and it was freaking awesome. So I'm really like, whatever genre, whatever, just I'd love to see her actually write a queer book. Another thing I'd love to see is Katie Morrison write another novel. So I'll leave a link to her. She's written one novel. I have not actually read it because it's kind of difficult to get a hold of. I think maybe you can buy it off Amazon, and I'm on a book buying ban. I've been on a book buying ban for ages and ages. But again, she's a fanfic writer who is freaking hilarious. She's so good, and she's published one novel, which I will read one of these days. But I would just love to see her write another novel. It could be YA. It could be adult. I'm pretty easy. Oh gosh, I have to put my notes down. Question number 6. How have your reading habits changed over the years? So obviously I read constantly as a child, and then I stopped reading kind of in high school. Didn't really read in college. It was very like sporadic, maybe a couple of books a year. I got to a point where I just encountered so many books I didn't like that I kind of stopped reading, because I was like, why would I pay money to read books that aren't very good or aren't very interesting? I think one of the things that I have come to discover is that at that point I was trying to read kind of like high fantasy series. I was trying to read a lot of postmodern classics by cis white men. All the things that I don't like. And I have only really in the last 6 months started reading again, seriously. A big thing that's helped that is BookTube, getting BookTube recommendations, realizing that there's fantasy out there that's not high fantasy or epic fantasy, which I just don't like very much. One of the biggest things that have helped me start to read more is discovering kind of fairy tales again, and magical realism and like weirder speculative fiction, which is what I love. And so my habits have changed in that I'm not just discovering these weird speculative novels. I'm actually making a point of going out, getting them, and reading them. So one of the things that's really helped me habits wise is TBRs. Actually, I make a TBR and then I feel like it's a to-do list, and I love to-do lists. I love checking things off my to-do list. I love having a completed to-do list at the end of the month. And so that's kind of like a reward system for me. Another thing is, if I have a to-do list, then I kind of structure and plan out when I'm going to read. In that I say, okay, so I have this book, it's this many pages. I know kind of the amount of hours it will take me to read that, because my reading pace is pretty consistent. And so I can say I need to read this many pages, or I need to read for this many hours, this many days, because I'm going to have this book done, you know, around this time period. And I'm not super strict about that, but that I like to give myself kind of general guidelines, and just kind of putting in that little bit of structure has really helped me stay focused and read consistently. And once you start reading consistently, or this has been my experience, once I started reading consistently, I just read more. I just read faster. It's really satisfying to get through really good books. Okay, question number 7 is, how is your reading going? And I assume this means, how's your reading going so far this year? Really great. I set myself a very easy reading goal of 36 books originally. That was like 3 books a month. I hit that goal this month. So 4 months or 3.5 months into the year, I'd reached that goal. So I went ahead and not a little bit more than doubled my goal to 84 books. So we'll see if I hit that for the end of the year and I can increase my goal to 100. I'd really love to read 100 books this year, but there's quite a few big books I have to get through. So, you know, if I don't reach 100, it'll be fine. Especially since I only read like 15 or 16 books last year. So I've already read twice the number of books so far this year that I read in the entirety of last year. So yeah, it's going great. I've just read a lot of really great things too. Like, I've had a lot of 4 and 5 star reads. I only just recently read my first 1-star book, and I've only had 2 2-star books, I think. So yeah, it's great. I've found a couple of books that are like going on my favorite books ever list too. Okay, and the last question, which is question 8, do you have any plans coming up in the next couple of months? Nothing fun. I'm poor. I can't afford to go on vacation or go traveling. I mean, my next couple of months, I'm going back to college to finish my PA finally. And that's horrible so far. I'm only taking 1 4-credit class and I hate it. Like, I hate it. But it only meets once a week, so it could be worse. And also, I'm really glad I didn't sign up for any more classes, because I definitely could not have done any more. Like, man, I have to take about 46 more credits, and it's probably going to take me a while to get through them, just because... Well, I say that, but I think a big part of the problem I'm not enjoying my current class is I just don't like the class. It's an editing class, but it's very remedial editing. But anyways, so yeah, I'm not really looking forward to that event, that thing I'm doing, but it's something I'm doing. And then otherwise, I'm just gonna be writing a lot over the next couple of months, you know? I've got 3 or 4 books I have to finish. I would love to say that I'm like gonna go visit my aunt and uncle in Canada, but I don't think that's gonna happen. That's such a downer note to end this video on, but you know, sometimes life is just kind of boring, and right now my life is just kind of like work all the time and read a lot of books, which, you know, that's the great thing about books though, isn't it? You can, even when you don't have the time or you don't have the means to escape where you are, you can always pick up a book and go on an adventure. So keep reading. I wasn't tagged in this tag. I just did it because it was fun. And I really wanted to do a tag video. So if this tag sounded interesting to you, and if you haven't done it yet, consider yourself tagged. And if you do this video, leave me a link to it down below and I'll go and watch it. And yeah, happy spring reading. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.